it's strange that a person that is exposed to noise as a baby or even as a youth will become something else, will become a heavy sleeper, and the brain can actually turn off. And it's not them being nice. It's not it being less aggravating. It is they're out.
And we're live. As soon as
You
transition
first.
this, there we go.
Well, hello, lurkers and bots. It is 2020-12-27. This is episode 36 of Lucid Indifference. That's lucidindifference.com.
Oh, there's a lot
Now,
of things I didn't
we're
do.
doing our second. Sorry?
There's a lot of things I didn't do.
Oh, okay. Well, one of the things is to make sure that you don't talk over me so that I can get the sync right early on. Because it's hard. So, you want to get your game going. This is our second video stream. So we're going to do it with a different game. And we're going to obviously have some issues with...
A different game.
Well, as a start, I'm seeing a black screen from you from Jammy. Jammy is the tool we're using, guys, for kind of sharing screens with one another. So I don't have to download everything, stream everything down from Twitch. And right now, you're seeing my video, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll just do Hades.
Are you sharing a desktop? I mean, I don't need to see your gameplay necessarily, but I will commentate when you die. That would be great.
Okay.
We will figure ourselves out right now, and then it will be done for the future. That would be awesome, wouldn't it? Just have everything set up just so, and never update anything again.
If only.
Well, unfortunately, the world keeps moving, so unfortunately the world and the software breaks. I'm not really sure what's going on. Okay, so what are you trying to do?
Did I not? Oh, okay, let me just shrink this.
You need it. We should go over a checklist.
Properties, window, this one.
Sounds like you're playing with OBS.
That's weird. Why is it not showing up? Oh, the game froze.
Of course. It's a AAA game. Why would it work consistently? That would be silly. I mean, it isn't out of beta yet, so no game that's online is out of beta ever.
There we go. Now it's recognized. Bam, we have visual.
Good. So you found, in this case, what are we doing? We're playing Destiny 2?
Hades.
Really? Why not Destiny? It's way more interesting.
Destiny's more of a social game when this one is more of a...
You wanted to do grinding? Is that not appropriate? Is that too social? I mean, you could do dungeons and stuff like that, right? Because nobody cares about anybody else. I mean, is this other game important to you? Will it do anything for you in life? You haven't... Do you want to talk about how involved you are with Destiny? Because that's pretty significant.
I view any video game can help you in life, whether or not you decide to use what you learn from those games somehow into what you do. Like, this is just essentially getting my fingers to go to make my character go wherever I want him to. And the worst way to explain this.
Well, yeah. I mean, I really appreciate the opportunities for me to sit back and it's not. It is funny. Okay, it is funny listening to you try to explain yourself, but it's excellent practice, and I want to encourage you at every moment. I think if I can interpret, get the Ouija board out, the audio Ouija board, is I want to take an antagonistic perspective, and it is what you just said sounds like the excuse made by somebody who's wasting their time, and you want to just justify wasting your time. And there's a difference between leisure and doing something that's related that will kind of, the percolation or sharpening of the saw, you change to a related task, and then that related task is unto itself is kind of a waste, but there's some stuff that maps over to things that do matter in life. You just need a break from the things that do matter in life, and it will refresh you, recharge you. Are you making the argument that this other game matters because you're still gaming, and it will let you go back at stronger into some other endeavor. Is that your argument?
Yes, as long as...
I'm feeding you an argument.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Well, I can't contest that because I don't know your mind. I will say, however, that in terms of this podcast, that is not an interesting presentation. That is not a very interesting game, to me at least. Can I see? Because I don't want to turn Twitch on, if I can at all
See
help
the
it.
game?
And I'm seeing just black. I'm seeing a black screen from jamming.
Hold on, let me just...
So if the stream is fine, the stream is fine.
That should do it.
You know, it really depresses me. We took a bit of a break and now our bots don't come back.
Oh, it's still pointing to the wrong thing. Oh, there we go.
Okay, so now I am seeing the game. I mean, technically speaking, I can full screen this and it would be all nice and stuff. And oh man, does it look terrible. Let me just give it a moment to actually... Yeah, that just looks terrible to me. Does it look okay for you on Twitch? Because that's all I care about. Actually, I do care about it looking good. Nope. See, this is a problem that we had before, and I'm sorry for people listening at home.
Okay, never mind. I'll switch over to Destiny.
Woohoo! I was totally lying about the graphics. It looked great. This is my cunning plan.
No, really I just blew a possible good run, and I don't want to go back to it right now.
Wow, so your laziness actually helps you improve your life. Somehow. Okay, so I mean, it is a dream of mine to be able to go through a list of ideas that I think that I'm going to be talking about. And I kind of have a note that says that I should go over bullet points, but honestly speaking, I really never know where I'm going to go. And I know this is kind of a flaw in the plan, because I know a person wants to get to know what they're going to get into. That was actually one of our early points of feedback when we were kind of beta testing things with the people we know. And it was, what am I? And the thing is, maybe I think too highly of myself. I have listened to my old shows. I am a man of great taste. And so when I listen to the old shows, I really enjoy it. And I think the difficulty is that a person that's fairly new, that's being introduced to us, is going to have to slog through boring stuff before they get to the really, the stuff that really grips a person's attention, the interesting topics. And I don't necessarily know what topics I'm going to be going into. I want to talk about some problems with gaming in general, and a couple of the traps that specifically the game that I'm playing currently, World of Warcraft, a couple of the traps that they have fallen into over the years. And I have had this line of thinking for many years now, so I think I'm fairly articulate about it. I had a practice run with somebody in real life talking about this, and it came surprisingly easy. I hadn't really thought about explaining it, and I think a lot of things are kind of like that, where something might be bugging you and you haven't thought about it directly, and then later maybe you kind of think about it, and it all really comes together when you explain it for the first time, and it just happens. It goes well. It flows off of you, and it's in this particular case, it's something like it was more a monologue thing rather than being asked questions and things like this. I had something to say, and that tends to be very good podcast material. So I'm gonna open with that, and the rest of the stuff. I mean, I've got a lot of Administrivia I still haven't really figured out, but I definitely want to get into the new Mac stuff, because I was right. I was right about everything that I had talked about before, and a lot of time has passed. And I'd love to just point at that episode number and just go, see, I know what I'm talking about. And I'm probably not going to bother too much. And enough time has passed that it's not like my insight is not unique. So I don't have to feel too special about that. And everything else, yeah, really is going to be a fair amount of Administrivia. But we'll see where we go. We'll see. So I guess the first thing is I'm not seeing gameplay. Is that something you want to do?
I have to change the display settings because...
Oh, you have to be in windowed mode instead of full screen?
Yep.
Yeah, that's a common one. That should be 30 seconds. Let's say it's been several minutes. So while you work on that, and maybe a scene change in OBS. I'm going to talk about, I'm going to start by talking about World of Warcraft then. So
That should do it.
I didn't start playing this video game right at the beginning. Right at the beginning, I'm sure I was playing other games, and I don't really know why I got into it, but it was interesting. It was one of the most successful early MMOs. It really did pick up steam, and I did fall in love with it well enough to have gotten into being quite social and stuff like that. And if you're fairly new to games in general, if you're fairly new to a particular genre, let's say, getting into the social side of things might not be your thing. It wasn't my thing, but it happened. It happened. So I can say with reasonable confidence that my past self really did enjoy things. And when I was a kid, I read this. I was a moderate reader, and I liked fantasy fiction. You know, the old elves and dwarves stuff before it was cool. And one of the series of books, because I mean, authors have to eat, so they often will riff off of their earlier work, and they might have a one-off book, and then it becomes popular enough that they like decide retroactively that it was the entry point into a series, and then they write the next book and the next book. And I read something called A Sword of Shannara, and I didn't know any better, so it's good, right? But I didn't know any better, so I don't know how to judge it in hindsight well enough, because I kind of stopped reading a lot of that stuff. Yeah, I'm seeing Destiny now, and so I read the next book in the series and the next book, and I realized that it was derivative, that there were so many elements that were just playing off of earlier stuff, and that is something I had in my head in terms of fiction, entertainment, let's say, that when I saw that in World of Warcraft, well, I could see it as a start. I could see it. And so I noticed that there was stuff that was ideas that were being recycled. And I'm not talking about lore. Like, you have storytelling in a book. And so when you've got story elements or character elements or plot elements that you recognize from previous things, and there's a lot of it. There's a lot of TV that's like that. I mean, forgivably, because it's bubblegum and it's kind of just meant to continue. So it might be a good show, but it's kind of samey. And that might be a good idea because you want some consistency. Because if you liked the previous episode, odds end up being good that you like the one you're sitting in, that you're still watching. Odds are going to be good that you're going to like the next episode. So that's good. For a video game, yeah, I would say that's probably a good idea to have consistency. So what I want to talk about is the expansion concept for the game. Now, Blizzard, they charge a recurring fee. So they've got a subscription fee, and the subscription fee I maintain is they're getting away with it, which I really strongly disagree with. I don't like it. I did calculate how expensive it is to play this game. It's something like $200 a year, or every 2 years, I think, because every 2 years you've got some additional content, so it changes the math in terms of what you get versus what you're paying, at any rate. So they've got the expansion concept, and there are two fundamental flaws that they make in terms of bringing out new content. The first thing is they want to shake it up. They want to make it all new and fresh and all this kind of stuff. They're making the assumption that their players get bored of what exists. And I don't understand that concept, because I kind of this is game stuff, so it is software stuff. I come from a more pure software direction, where they will, you want iterative improvements. So you want what you had plus fixing your bugs as a start. And if you do, you insert entire new features. You don't shake things up. You don't shuffle things around. You don't do anything that's too challenging for your existing user base to get into. Now, the notable exception to me has been Microsoft. If something like Microsoft Office, there's another technique that they introduced. I find it incredibly confusing. I can't remember what the term is. So normally you would have a menu, and it would be really obvious, file, edit, this kind of stuff. And, file save, file close, file exit. And it's pretty consistent. And they created this drop down with icons, and each of them has drop downs. And sometimes that's on top of having the traditional file stuff. And so I think they were just creating a new concept for their stuff and inserting it into everything in order to, I don't know, were they patenting it or something dumb? It was awful and it's hard to use. And World of Warcraft inserted this, they make these changes, and it is a guarantee that some of those changes will be a good idea, and a guarantee that some of them will be terrible, that they won't be well received, partly because people get used to, you get the curmudgeon perspective, where you'll get used to things being just so, and you kind of evolve into you get comfortable with it. People will grow and adapt into the nuances of how things work, and they kind of fall in love with stuff. And the thing is, this is an MMO, so this is a role-playing game where a player is, by the definition, and you can argue, because that's really a nuanced thing. So the player, it is unsurprising when the player really melts into their character and really appreciates their character. And the mechanics are right there, right alongside of them being invested in that actual character on screen. And so when the mechanics are changed, when nuances are changed, the bond between that, what's the term? That avatar and the player gets messed with. And so that's a very disruptive thing that happens expansion to expansion. So that's problem one, is they keep doing that. And they keep doing that without necessarily learning from the mistakes of the previous changes like this. And boy, do I want to continue with that line of thinking. Because the other thing they do is every single expansion they come out with this gimmick. And the gimmick is some fundamental mechanic that your character interacts with, where they're doing this stuff to interact with the storyline, the campaign, the gameplay. There's just something, and it's always bad. And I have observed this as fact. It's always bad. It's not just always bad. They don't even learn from their previous gimmicks. So the one expansion will have this thing where your character is a commander, and your character goes to a command table, and you learn, you gain, you are awarded, you quest for these little follower, and they're essentially tokens that you arrange into combats on your board, and you come back in however long, half an hour, and a fight occurs, and there's all kinds of percentages, chances of success, and different rewards that you get. But it's not your player doing stuff. It's not your character doing stuff. It's just this weird metagame. And this is around about the time when Blizzard's Hearthstone was created. So Blizzard's just copying other stuff, and they wanted to have their own success with the card game garbage. And they brought it into the game. So it was absolutely awful, and everybody hated it. It was atrocious, and you had to slog through it because there were certain things that mattered for it. The rest of everything was kind of samey and boring and whatever the heck. So it was there to be done. And this is just one example of a massive character distraction that the player was forced to interact with. So a different one earlier was reforging, which is you have it. So in a role-playing game, you have items, and the items have different qualities to them, various attributes, various modifiers to combat, because it's a combat game, by the way. I mean, that is the fundamental aspect of it. And what this mechanic let you do is take an existing piece of gear and decide that you didn't like certain qualities of it and kind of massage it into different directions. And what that did is that made all gear kind of samey, because you could just change it into whatever you want. So it really didn't matter what you got. So the underlying notion of being rewarded gear for performing certain actions, the reward kind of got watered down in some sense. And that was when a lot of people realized things were kind of awful. That, I believe that was Wrath of the Lich King. So that was their third expansion, or sorry, their second expansion. And this gimmick concept happened in the previous expansion. That's why I left the game. It was one of the biggest problems. It's another gear thing. There's like a talent tree where you can modify certain attributes on a piece of gear, but you can only do that under certain circumstances, and those circumstances only exist when you're back in town. It doesn't exist when you're out in the field. So if I'm going raiding, which is what they push the game out, so that it's mostly all about the end game, the maximum level, those final achievements. But when you're out doing that, you can't make those changes. So you can't experiment. And you can't change your specialization because the gear can't be reused for different. So if you're a mage, if you're a frost mage, or if you're a fire mage, you can't take the same gear and just, I want to try being a fire mage for this fight. That'd be kind of neat. I wonder if I can approach the problems of raiding differently. You can't do that because all of your gear, which was lined up to be really good, maybe some of it for frost, you can't do for fire. So you can't experiment. So now that what that gimmick has done, it's taken away the idea of different character aspects. So it was an absolute disaster. It was an idea, maybe some pointy-haired boss who doesn't play games put that down, and that got developed into an interesting new feature, a funky experiment. It failed. It failed so hard I left, and Blizzard took that out. Blizzard actually abandoned the entire concept mid-expansion, which I'm very happy. I did end up coming back at the tail end and paid way too much for this expansion. And what ended up happening is, for the current expansion, they have made the same mistake. They've made a gimmick. And the gimmick they made this time is all of the previous problems put together, essentially. So you factionalize everybody, which is already a bad idea. You've given everybody different storylines. You manufactured a bunch of separate powers that are associated with those quest lines that you have to pick one of 4. And they tied the powers with the role-playing flavor of things. So if a player comes in, they're like, those guys are cool and pretty. I like that. I want to go do that stuff. Oh, but that gives a power that's not what you want. Like, okay, well, there's a conflict between the role-playing aspect of things and the combat aspect of things. You never want to do that. You want people to pick the stuff that they love. That you want them to bond with their character. Now the mechanics are in the way. So that's a problem. They reintroduced the dumbass garrison table thing where you play cards essentially, and it's nonsense. And then it just goes on like this. And it really bothers me that what it must be admitted that this is a mature game company, that this is a mature game, and they make this mistake, and they do it on purpose. It is intentional that they create these gimmicks, that they make these changes in order to keep things fresh and new. And Minion, I gotta say that Jammy really looks terrible. I'm wondering if something can be done on my end.
I was playing with the settings, but it's either the connection or
is it being streamed okay? Is Twitch okay?
Yeah, I checked the Twitch. As long as I do it through this, it's fine. But I don't think my computer can handle this much stuff going in and out.
You got a pretty beefy computer. That's a bit surprising.
The video card is outdated, though, severely.
I don't know that ought to be the concern. So what this is a sign of is, because I am seeing weird lag, weird latency, like really, really long latency. So maybe you're right. So why don't you, I mean, just give up. You can turn Jammy's visual off if it helps you. And then as long as Twitch looks good, that's fine. I mean, we'll figure this out later. It's not like I have to write an item on a to-do list for you to go and look into graphics cards.
Mm.
So anybody that's into gaming these days is going to know that the graphics card wars are on again. That there was the release of the AMD. Is it AMD that owns the GeForce stuff? I think they do. They have performed magic in the world, and the stuff that they have come out with, both the CPU side of stuff and the GPU side of stuff, so graphics cards, the difference is astonishing. What they've been doing, they've destroyed their competition. They're the best. And there are other graphics stuff that's coming out, and I don't know how it compares yet. But in terms of gaming, a lot of people have kind of been holding their breath to see how things really turn out and what the prices are going to settle down into, because the scalpers came in hard and they made this graphic stuff just unavailable entirely. And one of the concerns that I had when this stuff came out is how effective would the brand new video cards be for like specifically Bitcoin mining, but cryptocurrency mining in general? Because that is one of the problems that hit the previous generation. Well, I guess at this point it's the previous generation. I ignored the 2000 series. A lot of the stuff came to my attention in the 1080 series was the hot stuff. A lot of people were purchasing the 1080 Ti, which is at the time was the best of the best. And I ignored the 2000 series, which was a good idea. I mean, I have certain constraints for my stuff, so I don't get high-end stuff. And there was a massive shortage of video cards right at that era because a lot of interest was being put into cryptocurrency mining. And so there was a conflict between gamers, and I mean that as a person who has video games as their primary hobby. I don't mean people that play games on their phones. So gamers that wanted this for the latest hardware achievements to actually get the most out of their even current games, just were able to really push these cards. There's a conflict between gamers and miners, I guess. And a whole lot of new technology was coming together specifically for optimizing setups for cryptocurrency mining, because it was at a point in its life where, like, cryptocurrency came to a point where it was actually when you invest a certain amount into the hardware and then have that hardware work, that effort could pay for the investment. So these 1080s were paying for themselves and actually generating income. Now I know. Oh, okay. So I'll give you one of the weirdest stories that I have. So this is a story I haven't even shared with you, Minion, which is 1080s were brand new and TIs were out, and a whole lot of them were being bought up by these specific people. And when you're working with a bunch of graphics cards, you wouldn't think that they're not necessarily all in a computer, because you can line them up kind of processing on their own and then have them pushing data all out into the same computer. So you kind of have these expansion systems. You would technically have one computer with a lot of graphics cards, like a lot. So it's not like a separate box. It's like an open case with a bunch of graphics cards. So you have two concerns. You've got temperature concerns and you have power concerns, like really big power concerns. Power concerns that are so big that people would actually have a significant electricity bill doing all this. So it's not free money. You don't buy graphics cards, put them in your computer, have it doing mining and then have it pay for itself, you have to also pay the bills of any other peripheral equipment you might need, like extra power supplies, as well as paying a higher electric bill, like by far higher. Now, for a small scale operation, like in a house, a person might have an array of graphics cards and they can have fans in that room blowing stuff out. This kind of stuff, like, okay, fine. But if a person wanted to have an actual farm for this stuff, there were massive like commercial scale concerns that had to be dealt with. And so what these guys did is they saw an opportunity because they all worked to run an actual, I don't know what it operated on, but it was an actual power plant array, like an actual like city scale power plant setup. That's what they had access to. They were the actual operators of this stuff. And what they did is they're like, well, we generate this much power. And it was like an off, out of the way area. It was like a massive power plant was built with the expectation that there would in the future be more residential stuff developed out there. But in the meantime, there was no use for all this power. And so they cranked it up and then they set up server farms using all of that. And they weren't paying anything for that electricity. So that was optimizing profits. So there are these guys off in like the middle of nowhere in China buying up all these cards, all this hardware, and setting up an actual like little industry. And so there's quite a background of problems with commercial grade. Man, we don't really quite have the terminology for all these guys and actual gamers. so I want to hope that the underlying technology for the latest graphics cards from AMD, the 3080 is the best in class. I want to imagine that the technology that cooked into that isn't particularly great at cryptocurrency, so that it's not directly competing. Because sooner or later, stuff's got to be made for gaming, and cryptocurrency and gaming aren't the same. So why wouldn't there be specialized equipment for cryptocurrency mining versus gaming, and have them be separate enough that one is not efficient for the other? And it is kind of weird to me. It's kind of weird to me. So actually, we have a significant amount of time left, unless there's a major lag there, and there may well be for Twitch now that I'm kind of doing things that way. What else do I have to talk about? Well, that's a significant amount of time. Okay, so I'm going to get into a little bit of Administrivia and stuff like this because I kind of have less to talk about. Unless, Minion, you want to talk about your Destiny 2 experience. You're grinding right now, aren't you?
Fuck. I just did something I didn't need to do.
Oh, you just went for that achievement you already had. This kind of stuff. I hate the interface for this game. It bothers me. It's so slow.
I'm slightly peeved.
Were you wasting your time? Oh no, wasting your time in a video game. But you had fun along the way.
I need to read things more carefully.
Oh, so what were you doing?
What was I doing?
Captain Explanation.
I did a mini dungeon, or just a small encounter where there are modifiers, and I just cleared it.
Oh, like...
Okay, that's fine.
Were you soloing it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It just says completed on any difficulty. You don't have to solo it. But I did that. I did that alone. I did the hardest difficulty alone, and it turns out it was the wrong planet.
Well, at least you have the friends you made along the way. Oh. Well, what you gonna do? Do it again.
No.
On a different planet. You're You're all salty.
It's not on. There's no featured thing on that planet.
There's no dungeon there?
There's no. There is, but it's not It's not modified, or it's not the difficulty.
Oh, so you can't get the modifiers there that you would require for that achievement?
Like, okay. So I need to have it on this planet, but right now, today, it's on this planet right here, and these are the two available to do.
Okay. And they just don't have the mods.
Yeah, so I'm just going to do something else for now.
So when you said farm, I thought you meant like just running around doing world events. Just shooting stuff, having fun.
I was going to do that, but I just did that last night.
So you're shaking it up, so to speak. Yeah, I really like just grinding the same stuff for some reason. I'm just weird like that. And a lot of the perform certain actions to do certain things, and it just doesn't do it for me. I mean, maybe it's just not obvious to me when it's made an opportunity, or maybe it's just too annoying. And a lot of this game requires a bit of PvP, or requires you to do some stuff that maybe you're not in the mood to do. And so I'm like, man, I haven't played in a long time. And it's not like my eyes have healed, because this game has wrecked my vision. But in general, staring at a computer screen has. I don't know how bad is your vision. You're not as ancient as I am. So you haven't had the time.
I think it's somewhat okay, but no, I'm going to say it's bad if you have to wear glasses.
Well, yeah, but for me, it's bad and it's getting worse again. So I don't want to wear glasses inside. So maybe my vision will just get so bad that it's good for a screen, and then it never gets worse. And that's okay. It's just not, I don't want to wear glasses in a house. That's, I'm okay with that. I can't see the time when I'm in the kitchen across the room, like the time on the microwave or the stove. And that's how I know that things are bad, that things went bad. I want to take a break from using a computer and want to do other things. I just don't know what that means. Like, what does it mean to not use a computer? I had a plan to kind of do that. I don't really know what that looks like. I shuffled things around. So this room was something of a library, and now I have taken the books and I've moved them into these giant bins. So they're off on the side. I have to go through carefully and admit that there's a bunch of stuff that I'm just not going to read, just because I'm not interested enough. And some of it I'm just going to slog through. Some of it I'm going to get rid of because I'll read like a few paragraphs and be like, oh, this is terrible, and I'm not going to enjoy it. And some of them a well-read man should read, right? But but they're just bad. Like I think I have previously complained about the quality of Sherlock Holmes, and that would be nice to have under my belt, right? Not that I'll remember everything. I'm never going to be good with trivia on something like that. And the works of Shakespeare, and I've got a whole lot of some authors that are absolutely spectacular, and some of the old stuff, but I read a bit of it, and the ancient English in it is just intolerable. So I have to decide, is it pretty enough to keep on a bookshelf, or should I give it away, right? So should I donate it to one of these? Minion was lazy / dumb, and I wasn't insistent enough. So when I was donating a bunch of stuff, we donated to what turned out to be a for-profit place, a for-profit thrift store, as opposed to one of these, not exactly charity. And you alt tabs, which showed everything, which you probably didn't want to do. At any rate, what was I just talking? I can't remember what I was just talking about. I actually, a lot of so there's more than this, but you can think of there being two classes of microphone. One of them is, I thought that's what microphones were, more or less, for kind of the residential stuff, which is the USB microphones. And I knew that there were the with the regular headphone jack, And so I thought that there were kind of two kinds of microphone for everyday people, which is USB and then the quote unquote older kind, which just use the regular audio jack. So there's that stuff, but there's also this other class of stuff that is professional, and there are some purchasable, more economic stuff that's out there, and there's cheap stuff. Yeah, there's like knockoff stuff and stuff like this, and it's a class that would be, I think I would generically call them all XLR mics, although there's more connections than that, and that's so you would say USB microphone because that's the little dongle at the end that you plug into your computer. These other microphones are XLR microphones, and I believe I can switch my view over here, and you can see at least the back of my microphone, right? And so there are microphones like this one, which uses a different kind of cable, and it goes into an intermediate box and all this kind of stuff. And they're just more expensive, blah, blah, right? And better quality, presumably, hopefully, right? It makes me feel good. Anyhow, there's a major difference between the two in the USB class of stuff. Like, oh, I'm gonna really quickly go and grab it. One sec. And I know you can still hear me. Right. Now we're not recording the video here. I know we're not recording the video here, but anybody that's seeing this live. So I'm holding up one of the classic Blue Yetis, and this is considered this microphone, this particular brand Blue, and this particular model of microphone, the Yeti, is considered the thing that people would get. So there's a point in time in kind of people being online and doing things that needed good quality audio. When that was a thing, when that first became a thing, this was the microphone that people would go for. So this microphone. And the thing about this microphone, so I'm going to show it up close. And so first off, this is the original. This is the original model. And there was a second iteration of this that nobody knows about, right? And it's strange because nobody knows about this. And hey, I've got this. I've got this other camera for this other view. I love being able to do this. So I've got this microphone here, and this is the last microphone that was actually legitimately THX certified. So this thing that I'm holding is collectible, and people don't know it. So all this stuff that you'll see online now, go and look at YouTube channels where you'll see like this up there. So you're seeing the back of the microphone right now. What you don't know is that it's just like a bland, it's still from Blue and it's still a Yeti, but it's not one of these. And the reason this can be THX certified is because if I flip it over to the underside, it's got a headphone jack on this one side, right? And this is just a regular, you'd recognize it as an audio jack for plugging into your Walkman or whatever the equivalent you newfangled people, young whippersnappers have. And the reason I pulled this specifically out is this is a USB microphone. Some of it is a little bit dated at this point because it doesn't use uses one of the earlier types of USB. If you're doing USB microphones now, make sure that you get something that the microphone is USB-C, because that is the technology you want for everything that you have. You want your cables to be interchangeable. But what I wanted to point out is right smack in the middle of this microphone, other than the volume control knob, is a mute button. And this does not exist on this other XLR class of microphone at all. And I can't, I can literally move some of my cameras around. I can point my document camera at this microphone, but I'm not going to because you're going to see some of my messy desk or my monitor or whatever. But the other microphone I have now, the one I'm presently using, has nothing at all. And it's a really strange concept to be just an everyday person and not have like a quick button for me to do this. So it means I need to have something on my keyboard, or I can use mute in Jammy, or I can use a mute in OBS. Now, OBS is acting like a virtual camera, but its audio isn't actually getting to Jammy. It's just sending visuals to it. And Jammy, so it's our Skype equivalent of Jammy, is picking up audio directly from this microphone, blah, blah, blah. I have mute switches all over the place, but nothing on the thing. And that's always bothered me. I don't trust electronics at all because there's been a history of them being used as spying devices. Apple, I'm looking at you. And so there's been, oh, this is a physical switch which actually disconnects the electricity, or now there's lights on all the items and that lights up when it's in use. So you'll notice that your webcam will have that. So I've got one here and it's got a pair of lights to look all cool and stuff that lights up whenever it's filming, whenever it's recording. And I've got another one over here. And this webcam over here also has like a little orange thing, both Logitech's, and they're not particularly, this one isn't particularly new, but even earlier generations of webcams have the same thing. But there's nothing for mute. There's nothing for audio at all. So this has audio, my microphone has audio. And a lot of people are like, well, it's been demonstrated that certain earlier versions of laptops had webcams that could get hacked into, and you can view things remotely, and you had no way of knowing or no way of turning it off, etc., etc. And it's a permanent concern for phones, by the way. and so webcams have things, and you know when it's off. But microphones, you don't know when it's off. And what's interesting is for wherever I put it, it's collectible. I actually kind of lose it, whatever. It's on my mantle. It's a piece of art now. So the thing about the Yeti is I thought that this button on it meant that it would no longer transmit information out to in my case, Windows or to whatever. And when I press the button, my recording software does not receive data. So I thought, okay, that's great. But I went into the Windows Sound, so Windows XP at the time. So I went into Windows Sounds, and there's when you're looking at your audio devices and you talk into a microphone, you'll actually see the little meter bounce around. You'll see that in Windows 10, so that's what I remember right now. And if you have the button in the mute position, it lights up to tell you it's muted. And when that happens, you can still see the meter bouncing around. So Windows still gets information from your microphone. So your microphone is lying about that. And if you've got a USB microphone, it may well lie about being muted, even if it has a button. That should really worry a lot of people that have certain privacy concerns. It's a good hobby to have, to think about these things, even when you're, not a terrorist kind of thing, right? Even if you have nothing to hide, blah, 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 that's the argument, right? So in the last minute that I have before break, so this my XLR microphone, my Pro mic, has nothing. Now, it does connect to what's called an interface, and the interface just receives its big fat cable, and it has electronics in it, and it is a USB device that plugs into my computer, and so it's kind of a sound card intermediary thing, and it's got a button on it for providing 48 volts to this, because it requires that power to actually become as sensitive as it needs to be for it to receive for my breath to actually generate sound, for it to pick everything up. And it has to be provided that from this specialized box. It can't do it on its own. USB microphones have everything built in, technically. Now, I can turn 48 volts off. And so what I did is I emailed Rode, and they're one of the reasons I actually purchased the thing in the first place, because I've actually talked to humans there. So I emailed them like, there's a button on this interface and it's branded Rode, and it came in a kit with this thing. I know they go together. So I asked them, well, I noticed that if I press this button and turn it off, the microphone stops working. Like it stops. Everything is lit up and quote unquote recording. It just nothing really comes to my computer. It's quiet or whatever the heck. And it takes a while, but it does that. It kind of drops off until it's nothing. Is that okay? Can I use that like a really slow mute button because it takes 30 seconds? And they're like, they never want to say things like that. So I didn't really get exactly a straight answer out of it, but essentially I kind of can force it in electronics to be a mute button, which is an option I don't really have with USB devices, unless you really rig something up, which you can do, because it's just, there are wires in there, and if you splice in a little flip, you can just cut power to your device. Probably a real bad idea, because it would disappear from Windows as a device, and you reconnect it, and it would have to figure the drivers out, and that might really mess things as they're recording. So you can't do that, but I can do this. But I also use software cough buttons. Anyhow, we're up on a break. I'm going to be back in 10 minutes. I'm going to probably come back and talk more about Administrivia and such. So I will see you guys real soon. And this is when I need to go and reach for that button. But it's going to take about 30 seconds to get quiet. I'm going to mute myself in Jammy.
And we're back.
And I'm lagging in Twitch, but I'm also back. Hi, everyone.
But, okay.
And that's, again, one of the problems is I am separately downloading Twitch to see the timer, which I probably shouldn't be doing. So I'm going to leave me paused. And that means my timer's off by a little bit. At any rate. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit Administrivia, unless we get derailed by other stuff. Minion, I mean, we were talking just now about the problems that you've been having in terms of getting a good picture out through Jammy to me so that I can see your gameplay. And that was working great for the other game. What's the name of the other game? Fate? I cannot recall.
Hades.
Okay. Well, okay, whatever. And
that's a different series, and that's really big.
Okay, sorry. And that was playing just fine. And you were saying that you also had graphics problems where, okay, so in terms of how video games used to work is back in the day, a game would take over a computer and it would be the thing that is running. And now it got moved into a task switching environment where you could have other stuff happening, but the game, when you're running it, requires so much of the graphics side of stuff that it would just own the screen. It would own the entire display concept, and you could never have any overlapping, anything like that. That was just not a thing. And that still exists today. You can have multiple monitors, but one of the monitors is owned by the game. And this is called full screen mode. And full screen mode can change the resolution settings of the physical device. So it can control your graphics card in that respect. And so you may or may not need to do that depending on what you want to show from a game. And there's another mode that games have called windowed mode. And windowed is just like it sounds. So imagine that you have Notepad or like some other program up. You've got a window and you can resize it, and you can move it around, and you can have it over top of or underneath under other windows. And this is, why Windows is called Windows. And you can do that for something that happens to be a game. But the problem is that it's using the graphics card, it's using the graphics concepts, but it doesn't have full ownership. And so it's kind of limited. Now the technology has improved a lot, but it doesn't really matter. There's really no comparison between the two modes. And the advantage of having it in full screen in this other mode is that it does grant something like administrative rights over the devices, and you can get more out of it. You can get better graphics settings, and you can do funny things like change the resolution, which you can't do in windowed mode. If you have like 640 by 480 or something like that, you can have like a tiny little window for your game and just have that in your desktop in the corner. But you can't, if you can do that with a regular video game, and it will change that's a really terrible example of a resolution, because that will do funny things that stretch things out on a widescreen monitor. But so you can do odd things if you wanted to. And the thing is, for something like Destiny is a mature contemporary game. And if you have it in full screen, then you can have better resolution, better settings, better quality settings. Like demonstrably, provably better. This is not the opinion of the user. You can change, you can make your sliders further to the right, kind of thing. You can make numbers bigger. And if you're in windowed mode, what you do is you can have it in full screen windowed, which means that it's over top of everything, including your taskbar, if you have your taskbar shown. And if you put it in that mode, you get like a regular desktop mouse. If the game chooses to let you do that, you can move it over to a second monitor really easily. But if it's in full screen mode, you need to return access to the underlying operating system to Windows to get your mouse back, to get your traditional mouse back to look at anything else. In windowed mode, you can just like Alt-Tab, and it's just another application. And I tend to game like that just because I need access to the rest of I kind of do multiple things at a time, and I want access to other parts of my computer. I don't want to have to Alt-Tab. There's very frequently a tiny delay. Sometimes it's really harsh if it's changing video modes. But if it's the same as your regular desktop, it's not awful, but it's there, it's present, and you have to Alt-Tab before you can interact with other stuff. You can't just move your mouse to another monitor. You have to Alt-Tab, return access, get your mouse back, move your mouse over to a second monitor. And second monitors are more and more common now, and that often happens while you're playing a game, and sometimes you can't have your mouse over there while you have a game over on your main screen. Destiny does allow it, actually. I have a controller, and I use a controller like an earlier Xbox controller for the game, and I still have my mouse that can be used at the same time on a second screen, which is actually really, really good. So Minion, you were saying that you had problems, and that Jammy, the data you were sending out for Jammy is of lower quality for Destiny. So the game was having laggy problems. You were saying that your hardware is not able to keep up with all of the different things that it's doing. Playing the game, plus OBS, plus streaming, plus basically streaming a second time through Jammy, that it's not keeping up. That Jammy is the one that's being really smart about it. And it's the one that's choosing to lag and blur everything because it knows that your graphics card can't keep up. So it's sacrificing itself. And OBS isn't. And the game maybe sometimes is. Games can do some fun stuff to try to keep a good frame rate. It'll reduce graphics settings on the fly, depending on the game. It's a new technology that I saw. It came out for World of Warcraft, and I know it exists for other games, where if there's just too much going on, it kind of silently turns settings down in the background. It keeps things nice and smooth. It's a really wonderful experience. So you were explaining how, well, you already know that you need a new graphics card. We had that conversation.
I just switched games, by the way.
Did you? So you're playing Hades?
Yes.
So you're going to redo that thing that you messed up earlier? Try again?
Yep.
Well, how exciting. We have a problem in the world where now we have too many games, and a lot of them have aspects that are replayable. So this game, it's roguelike, and I've explained it before, so I guess I'll explain it on a podcast. So Rogue is the name of an actual game, and it is considered an ancient game, and a lot of people don't understand where the term roguelike came from. It's a reference to a game that is like Rogue. So part of it is the aspect of it. So you can say Diablo was the one that really popularized it. So Diablo 1, and this is a real old game. You can get it on DOS, and it actually came out for the PlayStation 1, I think is when Diablo 1 became available for it, which is actually hard to find, and it's not a very good game. But it was multiplayer, which normally that's not a thing. At any rate, that's a diversion. So a roguelike game, so the original Rogue was just straight top down, and it didn't use graphics. It only used characters, and each character represents a certain thing. And it was kind of an intermediary between graphics and text, because there are text only games where it will give you sentences and you type in the things you want to do. You know, look north, and you'd get a couple of lines of text describing what was out that way. Walk north and stuff like this. With this game, you had cursor controls, and you had a little @ symbol that was represented your character, and you had other things represented by specific reserved letters, like lowercase d was a dog, uppercase D was a dragon, things like this. And walls were, you know, dashes and stuff like this. And it was not real time. So you would perform an action, and then the world would perform an action, and then you would, and then the world would. And so you'd like move one direction in one of the cardinal directions, and then the other enemies would get a move, kind of thing. So it's fairly straightforward. But what was interesting about it is you'd have the screen would be full of characters. It would be sketched out, and you would only see what you could see. So you have to explore to get the map drawn, and you could only see activity in the areas that had certain viewing range. So you couldn't see around corners and stuff like that. So it was a really, really good game. And you would fight and explore and find treasures and secret doors, and you could do all kinds of cool stuff. And then at some point you would find like stairs going down, and then it would paint a new full screen that you could only see the tiny little area around the stairs that you appeared from. And you would explore again, and things would get progressively harder, and you'd find more stuff, and you'd get experience, and you learn skills and stuff like this. And it was a really complicated game. Like, it was incredible. And these nerds put in a whole lot of different references to Lord of the Rings. So that it really, and this is before Lord of the Rings was popular, kind of thing. And so there was a lot of effort put into this, and the game was replayable. It was the game that was the most involved, the most replayable that had ever been made to that point, right? And I don't think that can be contested. And so there are other games that came that borrowed from that were still character based. It's black and white. It was just using text. So this is back on terminals before they had color. And other games did the same thing. And other games created like sprite sets where you would replace characters with certain, because a character like the letter A is actually like little filled in pixels within a rectangle. And so if you're typing a letter to grandma, you know, you've got A, B, C, D to work with, but each of those has a different set of pixels that's highlighted. So you could actually hijack the entire concept of that rectangle and repaint what all of the pixels are. So you could like redefine what the letter A is, right? So for using our earlier example, you could repaint what all of the pixels are in the letter lowercase d to actually draw a little picture of a dog, kind of, right? So you could shape it a little bit, because that was the idea of a D, is like it was a little tail poking up out of a little body, a little circle. But you could change it a little bit to have the tail hooked or something like this. You could make a dragon and give it some little fangs, and so there was a game that evolved like that. And there's a lineage that goes from that, and then adding color, and then actual graphics, and then resolutions let you have finer details and new amounts of color. And, you know, you'd have 8 color before and 16, and then now it's in the millions of colors that you have access to. And now there are games that are they're sprite based, so they have pictures, and there are other games that have simple animations, and then there are full games with animations and combat scenes and all. But the idea is you adventure a bunch, and then you progress, and then a new field is created, a new dungeon to adventure through, a new town, and it's randomly generated. The original Rogue was random every time you go through, and that was incredible. That is still incredible. It's actually still a very good game. I would recommend Angband it's a more mature type of game, but it's also simple and in the same lines of stuff. It's really hard to get into. And you can be an adventurer that's actually a tourist. Your starting equipment includes, like a Hawaiian shirt and a camera. So if a bad guy comes up to you, you like take a picture and blind it for a moment. It's just the dumbest stuff, just so dumb. But you turn into a proper adventurer after a fashion. At any rate, this game is being described as a roguelike, and it comes from that lineage. And it is a roguelike because you get new battle maps, you get new scenarios, and it's random. So it's infinitely replayable. And you have more and more games that are infinitely replayable for some reason. And roguelike is just an example of a game field like that is reimagined after every success, or after every failure. You just start the game again, it's all brand new again. And then other games are time gating and grinding based, like Destiny, where you can just continue to do the same stuff. And that's a really bad way of doing things. There's some randomization that exists in terms of maybe where global events happen in a world space, and they don't even do worlds properly. But if you go through a dungeon, all the same bad guys are in the exact same places, and it's kind of terrible. And some of that I understand. Some of that I understand because there are circumstances where if your player enters into that playing field and the randomization is unfair for some reason, that will damage fun. Now, I kind of disagree with that. There are mechanisms you can have in there to kind of mitigate the unfairness that may occur, but it happens both ways. And you can make things a little bit too easy sometimes, and maybe that's good, maybe that's bad. But I also like the idea of having players face the unpredictability, and there's some inherent challenges in there anyway, and just pushing them. And a lot of these games have no concept of failure. You just you get nothing if you fail, which I don't like. And a lot of it is if you pit a player up against something that is challenging and maybe even slightly unfair due to randomness, it will anger them. But if they still get part of a reward because they did their best, so they don't get the participation award, but they're still awarded for how well they did under the circumstances. If that can be pulled off, then I don't think randomness bothers. There's in gaming, I don't know, Minion, if you've heard this phrase. So in gaming, there's the idea of RNJesus. Have you heard that phrase, that term?
No, not at all. It's not a major thing in Destiny or any other games I somehow play.
The internet is weird. Was that sarcasm? Was I using sarcasm? Asking if that was sarcasm. So RNJesus is a reference to Christianity, to Jesus, and RNJesus is a reference to RNG, which is RNG is, well, it's a reference to randomly generated numbers, but in that is RNG is random number generation, which is, it's actually a really weird problem in computing. So it's generally playing pretend like you're getting randomness. Computers can't actually do randomness unless you introduce something that's actually authentically random, like radioactive decay, or like pooling a bunch of keystrokes and mouse movements from the user, because people are technically kind of random, essentially. So you kind of like pay attention to what players are doing and then take that data and mix it into this entropy pool, is what it's called. And then you can kind of get randomness pretty good out of that. But there's this idea, humans have this idea of, if you ever look into problems in gambling, there are problems in gambling where the gamblers will perceive certain trends. Man, if you do any gambling, so first off, if you do any light gambling. So there's not really stakes, not necessarily any money whatsoever. You will find in yourself certain beliefs, certain nuances of psychology will bug you, and you can know the terms for these things, and you can be aware of all this stuff, and you will still find these things kind of chipping away at the edge of your sanity. So one of the notions that we have in life in general is the notion of karma, for example. And there's the idea of balance, where if a bunch of bad stuff happens, good stuff's bound to happen. And that's just the human mind. And that just makes sense, doesn't it? But in terms of a computer, it doesn't understand these ideas if it's not built in. And it is possible to have an unlucky streak that feels unfair and that feels like vengeance from fate or something really weird. And there's this notion of RNJesus, which is a kind of it is making fun of religion in general, not necessarily Christianity, but that's the general experience of like the English speaking world, for example. And a lot of thankfully it's not so true anymore, but a lot of the mature technology games and stuff came out of you can flatly say the English speaking world, a lot of the United States, and a bunch of Britain. Things are not anything like that now. There's a lot of really wonderful work coming out of Eastern Europe in general. It's just starting to come to life. And a lot of the stuff that exists, there's a lot of notable stuff in South Korea. And there's a whole lot of stuff coming out in China, but that tends to not be localized and not be presented elsewhere and to not be connected elsewhere. So if you got multiplayer online games, it tends to just be local to that country. Because I mean, when you got that big a player base, why deal with the challenges of international cooperation for game setups? They just don't bother. Plus, there are some weird legal and political challenges that are happening contemporarily. There's some really I don't like them, but because there are social aspects to games, and socialness presents certain challenges, there are barriers that have been put up to just the wall that they have, the how do I explain it? I don't know if that it's becoming real, because I actually talked to a native in mainland China who I said, hey, I heard that there was an official top-down government policy that was actually requiring like automation in it's like I'm not even talk about it, that they wanted to disconnect between like international gaming, and as a government policy, it's just the strangest thing. And this guy corrected me and said, because he's like, hey, by the way, that's why he was lagging so much, is, he said, I'm mainland Chinese, and that's not, it's not happening with me right now. But it would be a shame if for example, World of Warcraft has different servers in different parts of the world to address problems of lag, and those players tend to not interact with one another because there's physical distance, and there ends up being lag time with them, really fast real-time interactions, like a shooter, or even like an MMO. It's technically pretty fast. Things have to occur quite quickly. You need good responses, and if we're interacting with one another, then it's slow and awkward, and it's just too annoying. So people are separate anyway. And so it's really, nobody would miss it if there was a policy that said, well, you can't play with, these servers can't connect because of, they want to have control over their stuff, and they want to they want to have their player base separate, their servers separate, right? They want to have their own toys. And So nobody would really notice anyway. And why'd I go off on that rant? I think that's a shame, personally. So I was talking about RNJesus, and the notion is that the randomness feels unfair, and there are problems in psychology. I will call them problems, where humans will perceive things in certain ways, and they will see the machine as not being as cold as they ought to. They will see a kind of spirit in everything, and they'll see, they will think things like karma. They will think a variation on luck, where they will expect and want and hope and something like pray. And that's why this concept is brought up. It's the haha, only serious, because it's kind of a thing. There's some hope inside a player that it is via this term being mapped over to something maybe embarrassingly close to spirituality. And there's actually quite a lot of variations on spirituality in computing that I don't think many people have talked about as directly as they ought to. And it's just the experience that a lot of people from certain areas, I guess I should say certain eras of computing, a lot of these people have a certain perspective on technology. And part of that might be because of the way things have been done in the past. Maybe things are different now, but a lot of programmers are a little bit strange, just because a lot of programmers are a little bit strange. And once you get up to that caliber, like the really good caliber, learn a programming language. You can think of a programming language like learning a language. You would think that it's mechanical, but as it turns out, it's something like art. And a lot of artists are kind of weird, and programmers are like a special kind of weird. So it is learning a language, it is using tools, but it's also, and these are already odd people. So there's a lot of odd perspectives that exist in computing, not just like RNJesus being the something like a coping mechanism for the randomness in computers. There's randomness in computers that feels really odd and specific, and people will grant personalities to certain things happening. So bugs, ignoring the original concept, the coining of the term bug, which was a reference to moths actually being found in equipment. They were called bugs. The actual concept of a bug, they're erratic by their nature, just because humans are kind of erratic in what they were doing in order to produce the thing in the first place. And sometimes these things come and go, and they're hard to nail down, and it feels very much random. And there's some sort of coping mechanism in people that identifies the software or the computing environment as being kind of alive, because these things are so, in many cases, they are almost unknowable, and they're so erratic. They are very much like luck going one way or another. So they tend to be perceived something out in that direction. So the people, so software engineers, the actual programmers and stuff like that have to deal with everyday people, always want reproducibility. They're like, what were you doing at the time? What were you expecting? And this kind of stuff is really challenging for regular users, but it's absolutely necessary for getting stuff fixed. But the thing is, some stuff just kind of defies reproduction, and it happens under strange circumstances, and it's so hard to reproduce consistently that it's like the software is alive. It's hard to nail down, because it's an extremely kind of left brain rational, to program is using tools, and a lot of the approaches for doing certain things in programming, they're well planned, they're very well argued systems for doing all kinds of stuff, all kinds. And yet there's something strange. No matter how procedural everything gets done, all these really wacky problems arise. So there is always this kind of spirituality that's there, that the low rung code monkeys, they don't need to deal with this stuff. But as soon as stuff gets really complicated, really hard, things kind of come alive. And these people are weird already. Artists are weird, this kind of stuff. Programmers are a special kind of odd, that there's weird legacy, like naming things. Like, your computer has a name. I don't know how many people do or do not know this. The computer that you're on right now, if you're on a phone, if you're on if you're on a Walkman or something like that, okay, this is fine. That's an exception. But if you're on an actual computing device, be it a phone or a laptop, being a desktop computer, I don't care if it's Windows or if it's Mac, if it's Linux, I don't care if it's something weird. It will have a name, right? And it has a name because it's interacting with other devices. And the devices need to be uniquely identifiable. And often when you're like installing your operating system, so you're installing Windows, it might ask you, and you might not know that you were given the option. It might say it's like your username, right? So you said, it's Joe. You'd be like Joe dash and a bunch of gobbledygook, and it will offer that and just be like, well, okay, sure. That's me kind of, and press enter. But that ends up being it's not permanent, but it's an identifier that gets used. And people that work with computers, that work with multiple computers, like network administrators and stuff like that, they have these themes that they name all the computers that are under their control. Certain things, like they'll name them after the Seven Dwarves, or they'll name them after certain other movie characters, or they'll name them after, and this is an example of some of the kookiness, the artistry that exists in a lot of these computer types, not just programmers, that you will find kind of all over the place and maybe kind of hidden all over the place. So if your computer is managed by somebody else, it may well have been given a nickname. It's never going to be given a nickname that's insulting or necessarily identifying to the person. If it's named something cute, it's named something cute that's distinct from who usually sits in front of it. So don't go looking and being offended. If your computer is named Legolas, you probably have some nerd somewhere that's a big fan of a movie or a book or whatever, and it just happened to have been named like that, kind of randomly, and they don't care about who's sitting in front of it. And it's what makes their life easier. And there would definitely be a lot of, maybe I shouldn't have said any of that, because there would definitely be a lot of pointy-haired bosses that would be really offended that their computer is being managed by a super ultra professional guy, but really he's just kind of like, there's fun happening. You can't have, there's certain business leaders that don't like the idea of people having fun, because they think that having fun is inefficient, something like that. I'm sure I have plenty of time left, but I'm going to double check because I don't have this thing streaming. Okay, here we go. Sorry about that. I've got a bit of time. So I do want to talk about the disconnect between pointy-haired bosses, the suit-wearing sort, and the computer type, because that's on my mind now. So there's a document out there. It's an actual kind of essay that I highly recommend. So if there's two sides of it, and most people aren't going to fall into either of these categories. So it would be interesting. So one is called the Hacker FAQ, the Hacker FAQ, and the other is the Manager FAQ. So FAQ is frequently asked questions, but it's done from another perspective, which it isn't like normally what a frequently asked questions list is people email or call, and they all kind of have, as soon as you have enough people participating at that feedback, you have commonness. And so you find all the commonness and you just shape your best answers. And you take that document, you put it up on your website or something like that. So you have frequently asked questions about whatever, you know. So if I had questions about my Tupperware and it's just the same over and over again, it's a waste of my time to go and just call them and get the same canned response. I can just go and know and look for the FAQ and just read through it and find my question. Sometimes there's a search feature and all this kind of stuff. You know, a knowledge base is a more advanced version of an FAQ. There's another perspective where that gets crafted ahead of time. It's like, we don't want people to keep asking us all these same things. So they create an FAQ ahead of time without having had that feedback inform it. And that's what these two documents are. So the hacker FAQ is pointed towards people who are hackers, which is a term most people won't understand because the media fixates on dumb things. So it is a reference to you can just shorthand think of it like a really super advanced programmer, computer nerd type. Just think of it like that. You can think of it something like when, like, there's, like, just say artist type. They're kind of unknowable, weird, unkept, just they're off. They're off in a different direction. They're a different sort of person. They're really good at their job, but they just don't seem right. They don't seem recognizable. They're not like you, right? They're not like anybody. They're like themselves. And they kind of can be lumped together. They're incredibly rare, but they can be lumped together. They're found in these sorts of industries, sorts of high-end jobs doing this kind of stuff. And you can think of them as lacking certain perspectives. They don't fully understand certain things, like managers, right? And that's the problem, is there's an interaction between these hard hacker types and managers. And there's a disconnect socially and in certain problems in business where they literally, you can point them in the direction of autism, and you can say that they lack certain social skills. Like they're functional people, right? But they just don't get certain stuff. Like they don't know why they keep being told to wear a tie. They don't want to do that, and they don't like the idea of doing certain things. Like meetings are such a waste of time. I just want to go and get this stuff fixed. I know what I'm supposed to be doing. And they just don't want it. And so this FAQ goes through a whole bunch of different points to help that sort understand the perspective of a manager. Like, what does it mean when my manager is hovering over my shoulder asking me the same question over and over? Is this FAQ will talk about that, and we'll talk about all these other things. And there's something called the manager FAQ, which does the opposite. It's like, why is my hacker, why does my hacker have his or her feet up on the desk listening to music? Like, why is my hacker eating at their desk? Why is my hacker coming in late? Why is my hacker playing like sword fighting with Nerf swords? Why does my hacker not like cubicles? Why? And then none of this makes any sense to the manager type, because they're not that kind. There are different kinds of people, and that becomes a real problem for these two sorts because they're so different. They're not on two sides of a spectrum, but they have completely different specialties, and they don't understand one another. It's not intuitive. They're both. Yeah. And so there's a problem with these highly creative, highly technical, nerdy sorts where they're so off that certain aspects of their personality and the way they approach certain problem solving, the things that they need, the things they respond to, would not be guessed at by other people. So one of the best examples is, how do you reward your hacker for doing a good job? So you're a manager and you're like, well, in order to reward someone who's been doing their job well, like they made a problem go away, and that's great. And they helped the bottom line for the business. Is what you would do is you would share some of that wealth and you would give that person a bonus. And it's like, what? that's not what you would do for your hacker. Of course, money is appreciated because money is important, but you would award your hacker with, some lenience, with slacking off a little bit, with by thanking them, actually recognizing them, because there's certain kinds of moral encouragement and stuff like that that really ends up mattering, and all these other things. Buy your hacker a toy, give your hacker a line of credit via the business in order to purchase some new computer equipment or something like that. Just be like, I don't understand. Here's a line of credit. This is how much you have to work with. See what you can do to, here, I mean, it's still for the work, still for the job. It's not the property or anything. You can do really weird really weird things like that to reward certain kinds of certain personality traits. And I've rambled on so long that I can't remember. So those, I am going to go out of my way to make sure those are linked in the description or whatnot. But those, I think both of those are written by, they're a collaboration of a couple of people. You can find them from, I believe that is from Eric Raymond and probably Rick Moen. And I think they wrote both of those. I think that's right. So I'll go looking and make sure that they're linked to. But if you're listening to this on some other platform, hopefully those names will help you. And Moen is spelled Moen. So how much time do we have left, Minion? 8 minutes. Okay, I'm going to look at my notes. I had been talking about problems of sound isolation in a room, about what you would do to try to kind of like pad, reduce, suppress the kinds of background noise, what you can do to muffle things. And if you've got a visual right now, behind me are bare walls. And I've talked about in the previous show about the problems of having bare walls in the sensitive side of the microphone, which it's not so big a deal behind me because of how I'm directing things. And there are other problems that I've been looking at. And one of them was, how do you help with a door? And one of the things that I had thought about was putting weather stripping around it and just sealing it up nice and tight. And that might be a good idea depending on where the room is, because if you've got a room that's in the bottom floor, then you might have cold air on the floor, like really low cold air from a door being opened from the outside, for example. You might have similar problems trying to keep heat in if it's in an upstairs, there are whatever concerns, but noise can get through, technically speaking. So, what can you do around a door? And there are these examples of people on YouTube talking about sound isolation. So this is not treatment. This is isolation. So that's dampening, that's reducing sound entering into a room. So if you wanted a theater room or something like that, sound isolation. Boy, is it complicated and expensive. And a lot of people are going to lie to you about what you can do. They just don't know any better, or they're just outright lying to you, or they're trying to sell you something. So one of the things people say is, well, you put this kind of like quilted fabric, then you'd Velcro it perfectly and you'd seal a door off. And it really has to be airtight. That's the thing. It has to be. And there's kind of a lesser version of that where I'm not going to pull it out and show you because it's kind of annoying to put back on. But what it is I've got it's a piece of fabric with two foam like noodles, like water noodles going there, and you slide it under your door, and it essentially pads both ends of the door at the bottom so that hopefully cold air doesn't kind of draft all the way under. And maybe that would help with sound. So first, it's not going to help with sound because you still have the rest of the door to worry about. And I tried doing some, you can weather strip. You just put them around your door. But my door, like the door to my left is not hung well enough that I can put the consistent thickness of weather stripping around it and have it close correctly. I would actually have to have different thicknesses of weather stripping in different places in order for it to close effectively and seal correctly. If there's the smallest crack of the imperfection, the incorrect thickness of padding, and any kind of air gap was there, and you can just like have somebody on the other side shining a flashlight. If you can see the light anywhere, then you've got an air gap. If you've got the smallest bit, there's just no point. It's ineffective. The entire endeavor was ineffective because the sound will find that one little hole and it'll come through, will not have made any difference at all. So this padding that I have doesn't make any difference at all for sound. And as it turns out, it doesn't make any difference at all for a cold. So I think I still have a problem where I can weather strip up a little bit more, hopefully. And what you have to do at the edges of doors, because it's frequent that the weather stripping won't quite work at the bottom, is there are these foam wedges that you can stick there. And because it's a wedge shape, your door will close really nice and firmly against it. It will nudge up and squish the foam, and it will create a perfect seal. So theoretically speaking, maybe I need that, and maybe I need a little bit better weather stripping, and right. But what's the other solution? Is you would like double-sided Velcro a quilt of some sort. Like a special moving blanket type. There are things that are made for this purpose. There are things that are made for this purpose for windows, but doing it over a door, that bottom crack is going to be a problem, right? So what can you do? So, but at least I got the thing and I like it. It's pretty. This actually works. I will provide a link for that. Whether or not it's still available to purchase whenever you're listening to this, who knows? But if you look for, I don't know what it would be called, like a door wind stopper, something like that. And if you just poke around for bottom insulation for doors, you'll find this. This is not the weather stripping that is kind of tacked to the bottom of your door that has a rubberized kind of shield that drops down. This is not there's stuff that slips on to the bottom of a door that has like little foils that point down. All those do is those provide a kind of, it extends the bottom of a door. And this is not there's like a little sill that goes across the bottom of the floor. Actually taking that, padding it up a little bit and having the door press into that is a really great solution. If you can get that done right. I tried that, didn't work out. I might try that again in the future. I doubt it. That would be the thing to pursue, but what I've got is kind of this temporary thing that I might do the same thing with the laundry room just to try to reduce some of the smell that comes out of there, because there's smell and there's noise, so whatever. So I'm still experimenting with what can be done in terms of sound treatment, and it remains to be seen whether or not any of this is effective enough that I could recommend it. Last thing I want to talk about in the last minute and a half before break is lighting. So as it turns out, there are certain aspects of lighting that are universal, like the clamshell lighting concept, problems of having a bald head or with glasses or something like this. There's certain lighting concerns that are quite universal. And I recommend looking up that stuff. I've talked about how to deal with the shine of a head, and I've managed it. I'm really happy with what I've been able to accomplish. And it is often light intensity and positioning that will solve a lot of these problems. But as it turns out, there's a lot of consideration to be made for what cameras you've got. So I've got 2 different cameras right now that I can check, and one of them can cope with certain lighting conditions better. Actually, the lower quality camera can deal with this stuff way better than my main camera. For my main camera, I actually need to have a background that is dim. I actually have overhead lights. And the overhead lights, they're angled in a certain way. And let's say that I'm ignoring glare, so baldness glare. It would actually illuminate the background so much that the camera gets messed up and will actually, I am cast in shadow. So I'm a very dark person, and the camera just doesn't work. So as it turns out, a lot of consideration has to be made, and then you just have to look through the cameras. and fiddle with the lighting. So there's actually nothing particularly universal, which is annoying to have learned. So I can't make recommendations, but I'll approach that problem again later. So we're coming up on our second break. We're going to have our third and last segment coming up in 10 minutes. I'll see you guys soon.
And we're back.
Well, hello. This is segment 3 of Lucid Indifference. That's lucidindifference.com. We're on episode 36. So it isn't that I have run out of stuff to talk about, because that's not really a thing, but I'm running out of some notes. We've got a bunch of Administrivia I want to go over, and as I said before, it's going to become kind of a shorter and shorter list of stuff to care about. And because I'm getting pretty settled into how things have been working, I've had the same sort of chain of macros that I've been using in Audacity that have been working both on Minion's track and my own track. And I'm happy with that. I'm really happy with that. So the audio engineering side of stuff is basically settled. It is settled science. And the lighting stuff, I think, has been figured out. And only if there was a change in cameras, in camera technology, 60p, this kind of stuff, or 60 FPS, and or 4K, or something like this, only then would I care about, after a hardware changing camera, would I care about changing lighting. So I figured all that out. Background, I suppose, could be something interesting to work on, but that's just art. And that's so subjective that that's not something I can really talk about. In terms of a microphone, well, I suppose I could recommend this particular thing. I don't know that it matters, though. I could empower somebody with the knowledge of how a microphone works and what to expect and what good means. And that's something I haven't given enough thought to really go over why one microphone might be better than another. Maybe that's a tangent I can try for right now. And I don't know that I can recommend this, because this might not be purchasable for very long, because they may not sell this as a kit. I think they will. I think that this was a great idea. And so I could recommend this. And there's a bunch of other ones that I had been considering that I think I can recommend. And the problem is, they're not that less expensive. They don't come all in one kit, which is a little, it might be a little off-putting, frightening, really, for somebody that's particularly new. A lot of people, when they want recommendations for everything, they would like it just in one package. And it's hard to give that. So there was another microphone that I was looking at that is one of these. You might recognize it as a kind of a stage microphone, and it really works for that too. And maybe that's a good reason to recommend it, because it's much more versatile. And this microphone is really one that should be fixed. It should be, well, and that's another thing to talk about, is how you position a microphone. This is actually on a desk arm, which technically means I can't touch my desk, because the vibrations will go from, well, it'll go from the sounds of the keyboard up, and it will reflect up into the microphone. You'll be able to hear the clickety clack. So there's some concerns about the microphone picking that stuff up. So your equipment, how you work, how you interact with the environment is going to matter. But also it's on an arm, which is connected to the desk. So the clickety clack or the movement can actually ride up the microphone into your audio, and can really mess things up. And on that note, last show I bumped into, and I kind of deafened Minion when I bumped into the XLR cable. So this is, so the way the microphone is. So the way the microphone is you've got the main unit, and it's on a shock mount. But underneath it, and I don't really want to touch it, even though mic handling sounds don't really exist on this microphone. Let's give that a shot, actually. So just very gently. Okay, so what you're going to see, which I don't like showing because I don't like that things don't match. This is this is a mid-range arm. This is an adsorptive USB dongle. Okay, let's ignore that. So what you can kind of see here, this silver bit. So not this shaft of the arm, but back here underneath the microphone, poking out. This is actually the base of the microphone here. And you can see the silver bit here. This is the end of the cable that's coming out right around here. Now, because of the positioning of an arm, a monitor arm, you need to position it in certain ways because you need to have space underneath it. You need to have it positioned a certain way, right? Because it needs to be close and it needs to be out of the way. And if you're like a gamer, for example, you can chop out a bit of the box, and you might even be able to remove the microphone from the picture. With this particular arrangement, it looks fantastic. I don't really have to do that. And if what I do is I transform my background into a color, into black, for example, I can actually make the microphone kind of vanish into that because it's black, which is another consideration for a microphone, is recommendations for how it looks to your audience, essentially. Now back to that cable, because you need this space underneath your keyboard, right? And that's why I recommend you lift all of your monitors up off of your desk, put them all on arms. I mean, it's not as expensive as, right? Probably shouldn't be spending so much money on a monitor in the first place, and reduce that price and put some of that to an arm. Pick everything up off your desk. You get way more reach, way more space. I'm really big on doing that. I've picked the mic up off the desk. It's hanging like this, but the cable is kind of poking up out under it and it's dragging across, and it's really easy to bump if I don't, I want to talk with my hands, and if I'm doing that, if I'm excited, if I'm keyboard and mouse, it might be in the way. And the problem of the height of the microphone and the length and the depth requirement, and that's another consideration for your microphone, is this is something called a side address microphone, right? Okay, so this, it looks the same from the front and the rear, which is why there's a little gold dot on the sensitive side of the microphone. It looks the same from the back. So this side of the microphone, the rear side, the less sensitive side, not insensitive, less sensitive side of the microphone, it's taking up, it's a rectangle that's standing up on its end, and it's kind of taking up space. And the fact that I have a custom fit for this set pop filter, this screen that's here, this happens to look fantastic, which was an argument for getting that. Now, this is side address, which means it's taking up all the space that it's taking up. But if it was a front address microphone, like there's the joke that people use these big Blue Yeti USB microphones and they actually have the thing pointed at them. They're sort of talking down into it, which is wrong, which is just wrong, and it's hilarious. But I've never seen anybody do that, so I think it's just a joke. Now, for a microphone like this, because there's a grill all the way around it, you might be tempted to do that, and your voice would just sound really kind of quiet, because it's meant to not be particularly sensitive from that end, so you will sound quiet. It will do its job. But if you have what's called a front address, so you're able to talk into the handle, essentially. So if you're holding it like a stage microphone, you're talking down into it. If that profile means it kind of takes up less space on a screen, or maybe it would look better, something like this, right? Then you have shock mount considerations. And do you have the actual arm, however it's mounted, in the way of the camera because it's being held a certain way? And if you have a front address microphone, you've got the XLR cable that might be poking at the back. That might actually look bad. The cable for this one is out of frame, so it's great. So what I was looking at, and I already ordered it, is because every time I make a mistake or every time I do something, I will be reminded of something, some opportunity that I had. Maybe I had notes somewhere, maybe I thought of it before. I already had this thing on a wish list on Amazon, my giant wish lists, right? Is this cable, I knew it was kind of in the way. And I thought about these other cables because I don't like that silver. I want everything to be the same color. I've complained about all my electronics being black. Stuff that's on screen, I want it to all be neutral. And in this case, black. And I don't like the jarring effect of the different monitor arm versus the cables versus the whatever, right? I don't like all that stuff. So like I've been thinking about when I get a different monitor arm, because I'll eventually get something that looks a little nicer if it appears on screen. If it doesn't, you shouldn't waste your money on something that doesn't actually matter if you can't prove that it matters. But if this were up on screen more, then what I would do is I would actually disassemble it and get some metal appropriate spray paint and spray paint all of the silver components and assemble it, and hopefully it would look better. I'm not the type, and I'm a little bit concerned about spray painting something and it not quite fitting together properly again, right? But I would imagine that if it's done correctly by somebody else, that it would be fine. It sounds like effort and money and something that I have to do outside, and it's cold out because it's winter and I'm in North America. And it's, December, it's cold. That's the thing. So back to this cable. Okay. So I got a cable that's dangling down, and I bumped it previously and deafened Minion. And I might have done this multiple times, and boy, does it look terrible on your track. You got to manually edit it out before doing your track-wide audio engineering. It's a pain. It's a pain. It's a really bad thing. Even though this doesn't have microphone handling, so I can move it around quite well, if I bump the cable, you might even interfere with the connection, the electricity going on. And that causes static pops. There's all problems with bumping that cable. Boy, are there problems, okay? Now, there are right angle cables where that connection actually, as it does not jut out so far and then have the cable go straight down, then you kind of loop it where you loop it. And these exist for headphone jacks and stuff like this, where you just have, it's the L shape or the R shape or whatever. And this exists for this, where it's an extremely flush mounted connection and it immediately right angles out. And I think I will be happy with it because it's all black and cool, like all of it, not just the cable, not just the rubber part of things, but the actual connector is also black. So that if I have this thing on camera, well, I mean, I've got the hardware on the monitor arm, what you got to do, but at least that cable is going to be great. So that if it appears on screen, it will look fantastic, but it's going to be really flush and really out of the way. And I'm going to be able to appropriately tether it to the arm. You can't tie it too tight because you need to have it articulated. And so I can't have it pull on the microphone. I can't have it taut. So, but I can at least have it really out of the way so that I can move my arms. And so I've been paranoid ever since, I bumped it once or twice before, and it really bothers me. And sometimes you do, like I've said before, sometimes you do want to throw money at problems. And it wasn't a whole lot of money. Now, at the same time, what I was able to do, it's what I got with this microphone, is it came in a complete, like literally a complete kit. Everything. And some other things don't come with like the XLR cable and stuff like this. And it costs it costs money, right? So the cable I got was long, very long. And it's a really weird thing getting a cable this long. My setup, my computer is like, okay, I don't even have to reach my entire arm out and I can touch my computer. Now, it's silent, and I've talked about building a silent computer before. So the fact that it's near my microphone is meaningless, right? It's fantastic. So I don't need this long cable. The cable it's not to the computer, it's to the interface. And with the interface is right next to the computer anyway. So I got this nice long cable, but I got to loop it around and get it out of the way. So buying a new cable is another opportunity to get a cable that is more appropriate for my setup. So I do have this long cable, this official, does it even say Rode on it? What is it? Yes, it does. Rode Professional Low Noise Microphone Cable. Batch number 0. Wow. Batch number 0001. Oh my. Okay. This is fantastic. And that actually brings up something rather fascinating, which is this other cable. If this is a quote unquote low noise cable, well, what's the next one I'm getting? It's like high professional grade, whatever, marketing speak. But this cable was tested with this setup. But the thing is, this is working with electricity. This is not, you can't really do poor quality with this stuff unless it's like really, really cheap dollar store cables, a cable is a cable. So hopefully the connector part of it is snug, which was a concern for this one. I would love to show you. So I'd have to pull out a spare microphone to actually talk and show you. But there was a problem with the snugness. I've spoken on this problem before. There's a problem of snugness with a cable entering into an XLR microphone where there is a metal clip to clip it in and give it a really solid connection. You actually have to use your thumb and a tiny bit of force to wiggle it out. But it's in there. It's clipped in there. And that's because you might have it, you might be holding the microphone in your hand and moving it around. And so the cable is actually really heavy and you'd have to have the connection stick. But the problem is this connection internally wasn't as good as it ought to be. So it was actually disconnecting, causing all kinds of pops and statics. And I know that this was a big problem for these guys because they actually manufactured a new product and it had some cute name that I can't remember. And they included that in the kit. They never even talked about it. It's not on the store page or anything like that. It was just kind of like slid in there. And it's just this little ring with some crimping in it that you insert into the bottom of the microphone. And then the clip is perfect now. So if I were to get another cable, that concern happens all over again. Now I've got the little crimpy ring and I'm just going to keep it in the microphone. And I mean, it works with the microphone. It's a universal thing. So that is making sure that connection is snug. So that's the only quality problem that I might have. But it's Amazon. I bought it from Amazon. So, if I got a problem, I'll save the box and I'll ship it back. Amazon has adjusted their policy due to COVID, where they have extended the period of time where they will accept returns. And I took really firm advantage of this. As soon as I messed up returning some sheets that I bought that were terrible. But I collected a bunch of other stuff and went, oh, well, I'm going to return this as well. Where normally I would just eat the cost and use that as a learning lesson. But some of the stuff was kind of a moderate amount of money and and as soon as it got to 4 items, I'm like, okay, well, no, this is all going back. I still have a USB hub I'm thinking about also giving back because it's like $25 Canadian. And that was enough that it bugged me, maybe 35. And I can't plug 3 cameras into it at the same time. I know that's a really oddly specific problem to have, but it's a powered USB 3.0 hub. Why can't it do that? Like, these are 3 USB 2 devices. Fine, they're all going at the same time. It's got the power for it. I mean, it's rated for it. It's not a problem. It's I don't know if it's watts or volts, but it's 20 of them. And USB 2.0 devices are maximum 5. Where's it 2.4? It's actually pretty low. So whatever, it can power it all. And so I have to connect all this stuff rather strangely, which really bugs me. So I'm thinking of returning that, a 5th thing. So if this cable for my microphone doesn't work out, I'm just going to return it. And I'm going to start being rather mean about returning things because it's remarkably easy to return things. If it's big and heavy, then, you got to get a car. Otherwise, drop it off at a post office. They used to use a UPS, which is really convenient for me. So UPS how do I explain it? So UPS has its own stores, and just like what is it? McDonald's made an agreement with Walmart where they have McDonald's in Walmarts. I think they're basically closed everywhere now because reasons that should be obvious. But just like that, there are UPS outlets within, for all it matters, a variety store where you can walk in there and drop off packages. And that's how I was able to do Amazon returns. But more and more of the returns, maybe all of them, are switching to use Canada Post. And that's almost certainly a price decision. Now, UPS may well have changed prices because of demand right? They may not be able to service so much. Canada Post may, whatever, right? Stuff happens behind the scenes and nobody talks about this stuff. So it is slightly more convenient, on the way to work kind of thing to swing by a UPS because you get more opportunities. And Canada Post, it can sometimes be a lineup because it's pretty popular versus just dropping off at a UPS. Like how many everyday people go and visit a UPS store as opposed to going in to people who use stamps anymore, right? We're going to a post office for, you can transfer money and stuff like that, right? So a post office is used for all kinds of stuff. At any rate, yeah, that was rambly. I don't know what else I can talk about. Like, previously I've talked about taking notes on a lot of stuff, and I've talked to Minion over the years now about taking notes, and I've got a terrible memory. So sometimes when I walk away during breaks and I go and I should stop eating because my voice goes all weird. And I can notice it now, and I can't tell if it's being picked up by the microphone or if it's just in my head, or if it's the sensitivity of the monitoring mode that I'm able to listen pretty easily. So it's being recorded to disk at a different sensitivity than how I'm listening to it in monitoring mode. I don't know if it's something like that, but there's wetness and clickiness in my voice if I eat. At any rate, I do walk away during breaks, stretch my back, this kind of stuff. That's the entire point of having a whole 10 minutes. That's enough to go and actually warm some food up and maybe eat some of it. So if you, the listener, wanted to go for a while, for the live experience at least, if you're at home and it's not live, you can pause. And you may well want to pause at the exact same time that we're taking a break, just for you should not sit down and binge anything unless you're doing something else on the side. But even then, man, not taking breaks is one of the problems in doing everything. I have previously talked about the problem with studying and the curve of there's an exhaustion that creeps up. So you start at 100% and it will crash and it will actually fall off cliff at some point. And you can keep at it for as long as you want, but it's not effective. So you take these little breaks and then you come back. You're not at full strength, but your break will not be a huge detriment because you'll come back pretty strong. And then take another break later and you'll come back, it's not as strong, but it's not bad. But if you took no breaks whatsoever, you would crash. And that's why we have these breaks as well. I'm going to stop, go and recharge, go think, pace. Minion and I talk about some stuff randomly, maybe stuff that might be coming up, maybe not. And I've thought about carrying a clipboard around. I've taken notes. I've got a notepad upstairs, and I'm scrawling stuff that I might want to come back, thinking about the things that I've already talked about earlier. And I want to talk about, I would love to see Minion's expression for this. So, Minion, do you remember when I was talking about taking notes in a notebook, and writing down the things you do every day and maybe some goals that you have and having some tick marks and this kind of stuff? Do you remember any of that stuff? You remember doing it? How long has it been?
A bit.
A bit?
Well, about 2 years maybe.
Wow. Okay, so I kept doing it, right? I kept doing it, and a bunch of the notes I processed through, and they're gone. But what I did is I ended up switching to these things, and so I can see myself. Switching to these things. So the brand is Moleskine or Moleskine, I don't know, but I decided to take it fairly seriously. This is a pack of 3, and this cost $9 Canadian off of Amazon. And these are Cashier's ruled journals. So it's a set of 3. And of course, I'll link to it. So this is 64 pages, and with some that are detachable. And I wanted them all to be detachable because as I processed them, I wanted to tear out that sheet really easily. Turns out that I don't do that at all. So it works out just fine. And these, I can actually put one in my pocket. And so I've actually carried a pen and one of these in my pocket. I actually doesn't even list the side. They are 9 by 14 centimeters. So this is 5.5 by 3.5 inches. And these are really high quality, and they will actually last all 64 pages of going through day by day. They will last in a pocket. So, so this is good quality. There are lower quality ones that I'm looking at that I can buy in stupid bulk. So, but I have these and I've been using these, right? So 64 pages. I'm only writing on, actually I am writing on both sides. So Minion, can you see my picture right now? You are looking at me? Look closely.
What picture?
You are seeing, so we actually have my image projected out into Twitch, correct? Can you see that?
Yes.
Good.
Can I see what image of myself? I can see you with a bunch of notebooks.
Good. This is how many notebooks I have full. Okay? 64 pages a piece. Every single one of these is full. Okay? Now, I have existed. You have nothing. Nothing to show for it except some accomplishments that you might be able to talk about. But you're still too shy to do it because you kind of halfway did one, maybe. Now, over the last couple of years, you had the opportunity to keep nagging yourself, essentially, right? You nagging yourself, because nobody else can, obviously, because you're obstinate is the correct word. You are resistant to motivation. And so you have to figure out how to do that for yourself. But that is what I was able to pull off. And the thing is, a lot of those days are like tick marks for some documentation I was working on, some of the writing I was working on. Some of them have goals. Like, for example, after the show, well, it's not going to be immediately after the show. So I'll go back and play World of Warcraft, but as a thing, right? So it is a thing that has a goal because I'm going to be raiding, which is an event. And I might put like a little tick mark in order to tell my future self that I wasted time playing this dumb game. So future self in a year will go like, is this all I did that day? I just played this game. And other times it will be, I spent an hour writing or something like this. So there'll be a tick mark for that, or a unit of time until I took a break and then just not define it. And all it will be is writing, one tick. And I will be able to go back and look at that tomorrow and a week from now and a month from now and a year from now. I'm at the point when, what is the first one that I've done? The first one in this series is from the middle of 2019. Okay, so I know what I did on Friday. What is this? August the 30th, 2019, right? That I was looking at my hard drives that I tidied. I did some great tidying. That I took a look at all my old projects to define what my goals are going to be. I decided to stop learning Dutch. That's when I decided to not learn Dutch anymore. I would later switch to Frisian, which I could talk about at some future point, but even that's not going anywhere. Right? So, and a bunch of other stuff. And some of these are just kind of dumb and cute. And my future self will look at that and go, okay, well, whatever. I'd be like, wow, I didn't even know I was interested in that back then. Well, okay. Or I might look at it and be reminded that it was a dream that I should have been working on over the last year. Like I should have been working on drawing, which I feel so bad about not working on that. I paid money, not enough, but I paid money and I learned a bunch of stuff and I know a bunch of stuff now. It's really great. But I haven't been working on that. I've instead, like this podcast, duh. So at some future point, I might go through the entire journaling process because I think that if I were to call it a diary, that seems girly and manly men won't like that. But it is journaling because I'm literally making a recording, a breadcrumb in words or bullet points or whatever of my accomplishments. And it's an accomplishment to have spent some time cleaning your kitchen. It is an accomplishment to do any kind of tidying. It's an accomplishment to read a chapter in a book. If that's something that is a pursuit that you set as a goal. So Minion, for you, technically speaking, playing Destiny, right, for a unit of effort, which should be less and you should be taking breaks, playing Destiny would be a tick mark on the page of stuff you do today. And in 1 month's time, for example, if you were to read back at that, and it's got like it's empty and it's got the date and it just says Destiny with 3 tick marks. You're like, well, what is that, like 3 hours of playing this game? Like what does that mean? And maybe that will prompt you to be like, okay, well, maybe what it needs to be is I need to set other stuff as a goal, and like Destiny rating, that's totally different than just a tick mark from Destiny. It doesn't mean anything. And if you do stuff like that, you will motivate your future self, or rather, your future self will have certain regrets and will be reminded and will be prompted from your present self. And I've talked about this, and you've experienced this, and it is strange that whenever even if you directly experience things that might be motivating, you would make for a good 85-year-old retired guy, just like chilling out, doing kind of the same stuff, like just waiting, right? A very boring person that just waits. And you are becoming something like that, or you have always been that. And you have these highlights of exciting stuff and not enough to brag about, which I think might be the thing that we can do to get you talking on this show. In person, you were totally awesome. You were really good. Have you listened to any of our, what are we calling it? The early files? Any of the pre-shows? Have you listened to any of that stuff?
No.
You should consider it. I mean, well, it's not an eat your own dog food kind of thing, because that's a good argument, right? But in terms of getting a feel for what that version of you, because that is still you, and theoretically speaking, it's at least the same you, and maybe you're a bit better just because you're a little bit older, not because you've practiced, but some things you just get better at. Clearly, if you practice, you will probably get better than if you just sit around. I intuit that this is the case. But if you were to listen to some of our early stuff, that might motivate you to, like, the middle of the night podcast around the table with a low echoey quality. I think that might actually be worth pursuing. And I know enough to do audio treatment that I could probably do audio treatment upstairs in that strange space to deal with audio quality issues. But having us in person, I mean, you might be inspired to really push for that, because you were having a lot of fun. You're paying attention. Now I was insisting on something being visual, so yeah, I guess it's my fault that you're playing games. But you were playing games before, just like on a tablet or whatever, as opposed to being there and engaged, which would be so awesome. I have a dream. But we have people that are light sleepers and are angry light sleepers. Even lighter sleeper than I am, which is really shocking. So I know this one guy, and he's an actual legit heavy sleeper, which I've met a few people that are like that, and it's not like they're nice. He's actually out. He's out cold. And I cannot comprehend that as a thing. That actually kind of, were that to happen to me, I would be quite upset. Yeah, I'm kind of very defensive, even when I'm sleeping. I'm not really all the way sleeping. I'm a very sleeping near in the land of tigers kind of thing. I'm just like, there might be panthers in the trees, and I'm a very light sleeper. And it baffles me that there are people that are actually legitimate heavy sleepers, and they wake up when they wake up when they're done, and an alarm clock will wake them up. But like a person talking just nearby, nope. Somebody watching a movie nearby, nope. And I actually engaged this guy. I'm like, well, why? How? I don't. This is so strange. This is such a strange thing. He's like, well, I grew up. I grew up in like a lot of people. If you got a sibling or something like that, so he's got a brother, and he grew up with his brother, and they shared the same bedroom when they were young, and his brother snored. So that's the trick. Is he grew up with snoring near him, and that's how he ended up evolving into a heavy sleeper. And I've heard of, so I've listened to all kinds of advice and stuff like this, and it was not a I don't know what the terms would be. So this is not like a nursemaid or something like that. This is not um, a the heck is the term, like the babysitter type. It's not advice from that. It was actually advice from a psychologist of all things, and he was talking about raising children. And it wasn't a specialty or anything like that, but he was bringing up a rather interesting point, which is because that was his field, and he looked a little bit into stuff because he was raising his children, and so he was trying to do better, try to be a better parent from using his specialty. So he was using the lens and doing the research through psychology to understand how he can do his best. And there's a whole bunch of nuances that I learned, at least from his research, from what he experienced, things like this. But one of the things that he had talked about is when you've got like a baby, a proper baby in a crib, you don't want to have that baby sleep in a silent environment, because what you end up with is a sensitive baby that's used to sleeping in silence, which isn't a thing in the real world, and that effect will stick. It's a problem will stick as the baby grows into a child, into an adult eventually, right? Does that happen? I think that happens still, or that has happened. It might not anymore. And you end up with a suffering. Well, the person suffers all through life by being very sensitive. And whether or not their personality adapts into dealing with it is different, right? That's something totally different. The problem still is that will be a light sleeper. So I might be cool enough, as long as people are being respectful. If they make noise, well, if they make sound, if they make noise, I'll be mad, right? Because noise is different. But I'm still a light sleeper. Nothing's changing that. A lot of people are coping, and they're using medicines of whatever sort you want to talk about. They're sleeping pills, or right. Melatonin is another one. Warm milk and a light carbohydrate, so like a cracker or something, and warm milk, not too hot, like an hour before. And some people have a nice shower or have an evening thing, or working out several hours before bedtime, and all these kinds of things. But it's strange that a person that is exposed to noise as a baby or even as a youth will become something else, will become a heavy sleeper, and the brain can actually turn off. And it's not them being nice. It's not it being less aggravating. It is they're out. And so the solution the psychologist was saying is to have the radio on in the room, and human voices and music and this kind of stuff, and make it erratic, right? Make it unpredictable, not like lullabies and not soothing stuff, but traffic noise or whatever. And being alive is tiring, so a baby's going to eventually kind of get tired and kind of sleep, even if it's in pieces. New parents are going to know this kind of stuff. I'm really sorry. Babies are like that. You're not going to get much sleep because babies kind of like they're like some weird version of a cat, where they'll be alive and awake and hungry and wanting attention, all this kind of stuff, and they'll be kind of tired when they want to be tired. And it they're the cycles of whatever the heck are not particularly predictable. So life can be hard for a parent, but having just this as the background stuff really helps, so that the kid will sleep more soundly, essentially. So that's just parenting advice. Parenting advice. There's a lot more to know, but yeah, that's actually a good idea. It's too late for me. There's something called, most people will call it white noise. That's actually the wrong term. White noise is, not that anybody has one of these anymore. So if you had an old CRT monitor, so a CRT TV, so this is the traditional kind of bubble-faced boxes. Maybe if you see one of these 1970s movies, you get to look at one of these. They use a cathode ray tube, and well, whatever. I'm not going to explain the technology. At any rate, what happens when it's not tuned to a useful channel is it's still alive, it's still active, it's still a piece of electronics, and it creates an image. It creates an image not out of the signal that it's getting, because it's not getting one. It creates something that it's been described to me, and this is wrong, so you need to look this up. It was described to me as essentially a projection of the background radiation of the birth of the universe. So that it's random, and there's actually sound associated with that, just because it's the static that's projected out into that happens to be available to be picked up on. And I don't fully understand how this stuff works. And if that fascinates you, go look it up. It's neat. But you can, like I said, semi-randomly, but you can randomly generate static, and that is white noise. That's not what makes people comfortable going to sleep. That's not what people are talking about. They're talking about nice, calming, repetitive stuff. Now, some people, they will go towards music, and there's a bunch of, like, if you need, like, what would it be called? Like, not yodeling. I want to say yodeling monks, but there's the orchestral, acoustic type of it might be religious, I don't know, in some other language kind of thing, where you will have that kind of echoey, airy, there's a kind of velvety nature to the voices. Some people will go to sleep with that, but that's not white noise, right? There is something else called pink noise, and pink noise is something like rain. And people respond to this very differently. So I can't stand thunder, for example. So if I were to try to relax, I would love rain sounds. It's great. It actually has to be remarkably quiet, because I get hypersensitive when I'm really tired, when I'm really asleep, when I'm really down there. And I don't have like a remote control for my audio or anything like that, which would be awesome. So as you're going, you might think of having it at a certain volume when you're going to bed, but as you're asleep, as you're kind of in between, if you're a light sleeper, you're kind of in between, you would need to be really, really, really quiet, which is strange to get used to, but that is pink noise. And some people, they actually like rain on a tin roof, which nails on a chalkboard to me. Some people like occasional other sounds that are in there. Some people like jungle sounds. And you will find on YouTube like 10 hours of rain, and it's just looped in certain places, but it might be a good hour and a half before it loops. And if you're sleeping, you're hopefully not going to notice one of the loops. And it's fairly well stitched together, and there's all kinds of variations. There's also I think it's worth me looking it up right now so I can talk about it right now. I think it's called rainymood.com.
Yeah, where it's an auto-generated sound for rain.
Yeah, exactly. And
it's not automatic. It's an endless loop.
It, from whatever its sources are, right? And it's got a bunch of fader sliders that will fade in certain other effects depending on what relaxes you or what interests you. And some people will put that on. That requires a net connection, so I would recommend downloading this stuff and having your computer so that I'm just the type, I want it to be backed up locally, and I don't want to have to rely on an internet connection. I don't want to have to stream the stuff. If you have considerations for bandwidth, then you want to do this stuff. But pink noise like that is reported to help people sleep. Now, there are also these separate offline boxes that you can purchase. They're kind of like a radio, and they might actually have settings in it that will produce these sounds. I was looking at getting that, but then I realized I had a phone. So why do these things exist anymore? I don't know. For old people, I guess. And they were actually quite expensive. And imagine paying more than half the price of a budget phone for a radio. And yeah, it's kind of neat and cool, but it is retro, and it is not something that's a very efficient use of money. And I'm learning more and more of that. It's like, why do certain things when I have a phone? I can't stand using a phone. I'd rather have separate. I don't want to have too much in the same thing, but for certain things that aren't really important to me, if I can do it with a phone real quick, yeah, I'll just do that. Minion, you were saying at one point, you were asking me, because I own all kinds of really weird stuff. I got like the strangest junk bin. I was buying a bunch of interesting stuff from China all the time. Less so these days because reasons. But you were asking if I had a tuning fork. Like, what? Why would I was actually thinking of getting one. A tuning listening device for a flute, of all things, just to understand if it was properly tuned to, because I had it made, and I wanted to make sure that it was actually made in the way that I desired, because I had a tune. So I've got something called a shakuhachi. So I've got a Japanese woodwind and a flute, and I actually had it made differently. And so I actually wanted to get a device that would like listen to it and just see if the notes were Western in the way that I was requesting. And it turns out you can just use your phone. Like, of course you can use your phone. You can use your phone as a tone generator. You can use your phone as a listening device. You can
give me a break.
Just playing this game.
Yeah, it's annoying. Oh, I think it's still on. Oops.
What? Your microphone?
Yeah, so you're going to be hearing a lot of the clicking.
Yes, it's annoying as heck.
I forgot to turn it off.
My audio engineering my future self is going to hate you, just like my past audio engineering self hates you. And yeah, you need to. Anyway, we're in the last couple of minutes. I keep forgetting to talk about the Mac related stuff. So, wow. In 2 minutes. Okay, so Apple made a bunch of really drastic changes to their hardware, which required really drastic changes to their software, and that all happened. It all happened, and it came out, and their new stuff is so intriguing that I actually did look at getting one of their laptops. Specifically, they've got a fanless laptop, which is really impressive to me, because that's a moving part, and I would never think that Apple would get rid of that, because they want a moving part so that it will break down, because they build their stuff they manufacture products that do not last, and they do that on purpose. And yes, I have proof of all that. And so, but I was looking at this fanless thing, and the first thing I look at the keyboard layout. I look at that and I'm like, well, it doesn't matter. I will not even consider certain laptops, no matter how good the specs are, or the warranty, the manufacturer, anything. I don't care. I look at the keyboard. If the keyboard is no good, if it's not recognizable, it's got keys in dumb places and stuff like this, I just won't get it. I don't care if it's on sale. It doesn't matter. And Apple's keyboards are perfect. Perfect. I mean, obviously you have the dumb Apple key, right? Okay, well, whatever, right? It's a dumb Windows key, so same thing, I guess. But I was thinking about it. And I could talk more about the underlying technology and why I might be interested in it. But I might be able to run a virtual machine on it. I've got a guy who's going to be doing some testing on that, hopefully. Man, I don't think he's going to get a hold of me when it does it. He's just going to put it out, so I need to go pay attention to it. Bookmark his stuff. I think I forgot. I just go look. Because if it works well with a virtual machine, I can put Linux on it. I don't know if I'll be able to run the same games I want on it, but I don't know if I care anymore. I mean, like, I'll have a separate desktop and I'll just use this laptop for all kinds. Like, I'll be an audio nerd because all the audio nerds use it. Apple. Maybe I'll do that. So we are done. We are done for today. We're going to be back in 1 week. This has changed into a Sundays only show. We might change it into a Friday, maybe a Saturday thing, and then you can like know life with us and just chat. And that might be more appropriate because we have people that will work on Monday. It's a little weird these days because, you know, maybe it's working from home on Monday and things are a little bit different. So you would be forgiving for staying up late for listening to this because we are pretty late for East Coasters, right? Well, okay, so this has been 2020-12-27, episode 36 of Lucid Indifference. That's lucidindifference.com. Thank you for joining us. We'll be back in a week. I'll see you guys real soon.